So members, we're out a couple of committees, and so we're just going to hold a bit till we get a couple more committees here. So we're not gaveling in, we're just holding a bit. All right, members. Members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 173. Just kidding. We'll wait for the motion first. You could have called for the question right there. All right, members, we're going to continue with our deliberation, our debate on 173. Next amendment for our consideration. The next amendments, apparently, for our consideration are second reading of amendment number 6, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thanks for your patience today. This is important, and I think it's worth the time and effort we put into it. Mr. Speaker, I move second reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 173 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, last Thursday, if you recall, we were talking about House Bill 171, House Bill 173, and we had 2 bills that were in front of us. And I recommended that we go with a substitute bill, even though it was a lower number of reductions. Sensing that you were leaning the other direction, I indicated to you that I would bring some ideas to you today if you are interested in additional cuts. So with that said, in your box in the foyer was a cream colored paper. I appreciate if you'd pull that back out. And also if you, for those online, I sent an email at 10:30 that has that attachment to it. While you're familiarizing yourself with that paper, let's talk a little bit about recalibration to make sure we're on the same page, shall we? This is called the recalibration bill. So what does that really mean? What does that word recalibrate mean? I'd like to submit to you an explanation, just an example of what that could mean. So let's say that a district, by the number of students they have, qualifies for 5 librarians. They also coincidentally happen to qualify for 5 groundskeepers. But that particular district might have 6 buildings. And so they say, I really need 6 librarians, not 5. So the superintendent looks around and he notices that since they've put in the artificial turf on the football field, he doesn't need 5 groundskeepers anymore. So he hires 4 groundskeepers and 6 librarians. That's the beauty of the model. We go through a complicated process to calculate what the districts deserve and what they need to provide an adequate education. And then we write them a check and let them make the decisions on the ground basis. That's a fundamental and great part about the recalibration process. And so back to my example. So over time, all the districts notice that they only need the equivalent of 4 groundskeepers, and they all need more librarians. And so over time, all the districts are shifting these weights around. So we're required by law to go in and evaluate. We call it recalibrate the model every 5 years. So a typical recalibration effort would go in and say, wow, our districts clearly need more librarians, and they clearly need less groundskeepers. And so we adjust the model. That's what recalibration is all about. Now, that was a very simplified, I mean, there's salaries and extracurricular activities and many things that go on in the model, but that gives you a brief explanation of a simplified version of what it could look like. And so at the beginning of this year, the speaker sent a group of us and the other chamber sent a group, and they formed what's called the recalibration committee. They spent all summer long studying. The consultants were on board. They explained when number crunching. Interesting enough, because besides just looking at straight up recalibration, they had this big looming $300 million deficit hanging over their shoulders. How do you really recalibrate and be fair with everyone when you've got this big deficit hanging over you? But it was a daunting task. The calibration committee crunched through it. They did not, it appeared to me, get into the level of the details of the librarians and the groundskeepers. There was so many bigger issues and a lot of strong opinions on both sides of the aisle. And so what happened is the last day, the two chairmen brought forward a calibration bill that itemized, did a lot of good things, but it finally just said, we've agreed on two major things. One is, we believe the governor asked for a 10% reduction. That's roughly 150 million. But after hearing testimony from all the districts, they determined that 150 million was going to be too deep a cut. We could not provide an adequate education to our kids at that level of cuts. What they did agree on, both chambers, is that $100 million cut was the appropriate number to whittle away at the 300 million deficit. Interesting enough, the 100 million was attached to an ADM, which means it would be evenly spread out amongst the districts, relatively fair that way. But the experts that I spoke to said there's one fundamental problem with that, and that is it's a lump sum cut. It's not justified and would probably end up in a court of law. But it was a good placeholder. The other second item in the 161 that was changed by our education committee was the second leg, and that was the fund transfer discussion. I'm sorry, that wasn't in the original. The second concept was the taxes. The 1 cent sales tax was included in that. So the House committee changed out 161 and replaced it with 173, that included that third leg, which, interesting enough, you eliminated this morning. So after the recalibration was over with, about 10 days later, I called LSO on the phone and I said, so is someone picking up the charge to try to earmark the 100 million so that they're specific into categories? How many librarians do we need, et cetera? And I was surprised to learn that no one was taking off with that. And I'm retired, I have time. My time on the education committee taught me a lot. I was intrigued by the model, I always have been, and I have more calculators than what the average citizen does, and so I'm kind of that guy. So I took it up on myself. So I worked with LSO and earmarked $100 million worth of cuts. I then communicated with the recalibration committee and sent them a draft. I sent a draft to the education committee, both sides. I communicated with departments, organizations, associations, superintendents, teachers, whoever I could reach out to be included in this team to come together to advise how we can divvy up this $100 million. And when it was all said and done, what you have in front of you in the yellow manila sheet was that effort. That did not cut anything new. I just simply wanted to earmark so that whatever we presented on the floor and adopted into law, it was defensible in the court of law. So looking at the yellow sheet, I presented this to the House Education Committee and they adopted everything here. 1 minute later, they quickly moved to pull out 5 of these items and we kept 3 in. So in the right-hand column, see where I've typed in previously adopted? A, F, and G are adopted in and are included in the current 173 bill. I want to draw your attention to just one of those because the majority floor leader described them to you before, but number A is very important to you. The very first thing I noticed when we were looking for things that are out of keel, out of whack, I called them, things that we're funding that the districts are either not implementing or they need more of. And we heard from many superintendents to say, we are not, the model doesn't give us enough money for salaries. We're having to pay this level to hire and retain teachers. And I thought, even though we have this looming $300 million debt, I don't think it was appropriate to just ignore salary issue and just cut in all other categories. So one of the first things we proposed was to add $55 million to the model for teacher salaries. Would you circle that on your paper? Because that's important for you as you're talking to your education community. $55 million we've added to the model to build up and beef up your teacher salaries. Well, that made the challenge a little bit tougher. Now, all of a sudden, instead of earmarking 100 million, I had to earmark 150 million, but I did that. And you can see the rest of them. So I compliment the education committee for adopting A, F, and G. They're already inside the bill. So I'm bringing the rest of them here. I'm sensing that you are interested in, if we're going to implement a tax, does the cut needs to be high enough that we can feel good about that when we explain the tax to our people? So we're going to break this down into divisions. And so here we go. Mr. Chairman, I move to divide the amendment accordingly. Division number 1.
Would you
On
go
your
ahead and move the entire amendment and then we'll divide? You may have done it early, but I gave you plenty of latitude in your opening statement. So please remind us, move it, and then we'll start dividing.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 173.
Thank you. Division 1.
Division 1 is page 1, lines 4 through 21. That is the tutors and facilitators group on your yellow sheet.
Okay, Division 1 is lines 4 through 21.
Division number
Please
2
proceed.
is page 1, lines 22 through 26.
Division 2, lines 22 through 26. Thank you.
That has to do with summer school. Division 3, Mr. Speaker, is a little more complicated because it bounces around. Page 1, lines 1 through 3, and lines 27 through 42. And then on page 2, lines 1 through 5, and lines 8 through 32. That has to do with shortening the contract days by 3.
So to affirm, Division 3 is page 1, lines 1 through 3, 23 through 42, page 2, 1 through 5, and 8 through 32.
Mr. Speaker,
Division 3. Next.
Division number 4 is page 2, lines 33 through 47, and page 3, lines 1 and 2. That has to do with the carryover reserve and the time frame that we're executing.
Okay, thank you.
And division number 5, Mr. Speaker, is page 2, lines 6 and 7.
So number 4 is page 2, 33 through 47, and all of page 3. Division 5 is page 6 and 7. So the chair has already reviewed this, because I'm sure not going to make a call at this juncture. It is divisible. And you would like to start with Division 1?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So Division 1, members of the body, is page 1 of the amendment, 2006, lines 4 through 21. That is Division 1. Please proceed, Representative Simpson.
Thank
First
you,
time.
Mr. Speaker. Okay, so on your yellow sheet, you're going to look at tutors, line D, and instructional facilitators, line H. So the next column over, the model provides for 376 full-time equivalents. 376. Actually, in the field, the districts have employed 154 FTEs. So the consultants liked tutors. They recommended we have more tutors. So I didn't calibrate down to the 154 I agreed with the consultants. We needed more tutors than what the districts are using. So this amendment reduces the allocation down to 187 FTEs. Okay, let's drop down to instructional facilitators. Again, the model allows for 135 instructional facilitators. On the ground, the districts are really only hiring 81. A recalibration effort would suggest that we should go to 81. But again, the consultants encouraged more instructional facilitators. And so we settled on 102 facilitators. That's what this amendment does. So if you take the 2.8 million and add it to the 16 million, for those of you keeping the math, that's $18.8 million that you would increase the deductions to the school districts. With that, I'll step aside, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, members. We're on second reading amendment number 6, Division 1, lines 4 through 21, page 1 of the amendment. Majority Floor Leader Summers and then Representative Newsom.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So with the bill started out today, we had a $31 million cut to education. That was phased in over 3 years, so it was only looked like $10 million, it was $10 million a year. So 31 million, and we pulled out nurses, we're now at 40 million. $40 million cut. I really do not want to see this bill leave with more than a $60 to $70 million cut to education, just saying. I do not want to see more than that. And at that point, I'd probably vote against all of it. And so that's kind of my threshold. Now, what the good bringer of this amendment didn't say is, we're going to recalibrate, he says. So what he's looking at, or what this amendment looks at, is more right sizing it to what's actually occurring in districts. But we're not looking at all the elements of the model that show the opposite. And so I got one here for you. So let's take a look at AIDS. The model generates 639 aides. They actually use 775 aides, 136 additional personnel. So we're not right sizing that. And those aides' salary in the model is right about 20,000, and districts are actually paying 24.6 or 24,600 to get those aides there. That's aides are of lesser education. And that is like the minimum you can pay somebody to get them there in these districts and throughout Wyoming. What we do is we spend more money on personnel to get them to live in LaBarge, Wyoming, Pinedale, Wyoming, Big Piney, Wyoming. That's in my area. I will not pick on other people's areas. But, you know, it takes money to get people there. And so as we look at this, there's a series of these amendments. And because they're divided, it's really hard to talk about them in aggregate. But these two together, they reduce, let's take a look at this yellow sheet. I'm trying to figure it out here. 16, so we're looking at about 18, almost 19 million. So if we do this division, that 19 million goes on top of that 40 million. And you're at 59 million. You're at almost 60 million. Just think about that. This one doesn't concern me as some of the others, but there's still, tutors are really important in schools. And so I, you know, as we all probably did, I emailed my districts, texted them, you know, and IFs have never been favorable. Okay, I'll give that one, but tutors are important, and aides are used like tutors. And so you can't have the conversation about eliminating tutors if you don't have the conversation about the extra aides that are needed to support those teachers with those children to make sure they're kept up in their grades. So as we go down the line, every time we pass one of these, I'm gonna tell you how much it's cutting away from education in Wyoming. We pass this one, okay, but then then I fight everything else. Put my foot down. And I'll fight it as long as I have to.
Thank you. We don't have to fight. We can debate and we'll stay on the amendments. That would be really helpful. And it's going to be difficult. I understand that, but let's try to stay in the amendments because this is a big division. And we got, I think, 8 more amendments after this. Representative Newsom for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the bringer of these amendments. I sure appreciate your hard work, and I do appreciate your handout. What I'm trying to do is go to the bill and figure out where from your handout and from the amendment and everything, where in the bill this sits. And I got to page 10. And I think that this is where I'm supposed to be. But I would hope in future explanations that you would reference the page of the bill that we're looking at, given that you've given us all this other great information. Thank you very much.
Representative Ottman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just looking at the different levels of this and to go along with what the majority floor leader was saying, with the aids that are funded, in the particular district that I worked in, they hadn't been funded. So this was something that came in. But just to explain that position a little bit, in a neighborhood where you don't have possibly a teaching degree or you're a retired teacher, there are a lot of people that covet those jobs in the school districts to be those aides and those tutors. You don't have to pay the competitive salaries that you may have to pay to bring in some teachers. So I would just say that with the benefits that come along with those positions and with the close, good jobs at home, these are positions that fill up pretty quickly, and lots of people are benefited by serving with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Yin, Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on Division 1, we're talking about, I heard the good bringer of the amendment talk about we're trying to recalibrate, right, to help match the model to what we have in real life. So my question is, if we start cutting things away from the model to recalibrate it to how we see aides versus tutors and instructional facilitators, but we don't readjust the part of the model where the money goes, which my assumption is the teachers. Please, if the good bringer or anyone on the education committee can tell me where this money goes, if it doesn't go to them, then we're just cutting teachers. Is that correct? And if that's so, maybe someone can explain to me what the benefit of doing that is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Harshman, first time, Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Folks, I think there were some comments on what recalibration is. And really what we've learned over the years is really 3 approaches to it. One's called the statistical model. Company will go in and they'll look at all the various components in school districts around the nation and see what works and come with a statistical analysis. And this is what your education program should be. And then there's the professional judgment panel succeeding schools model. This is the one we did in 2017, where you look at what are the best schools? What are they doing? You go in and find out, and then you develop a model. And what Wyoming has done is done this evidence-based model, what actually works out there. And so we've done 2 of the 3 different models. One in 2017 said we were 60 or 70 million short. We did that in an effort to try to reduce funding. We used a different method, hoping it would come in lower. It came in higher. This last evidence-based model came in 20 million higher. Recalibration is not a look at what's going on the ground now and a readjustment. That is not what recalibration is. Recalibration is looking at what is the best model to educate kids in Wyoming. And then what does it cost? Because it's way different in this state. And, you know, in the little town of Cowley up there in Bighorn, starting salary 50,000. It's way higher in Casper. It's way higher in the model starting salary of 38,000. How can they do that? How can you hire less tutors but hire more aides? All these things are done by local school boards because they know what they got to do to get people to come there and work, do their jobs. And so I just really want to be really careful. Recalibration is not an adjustment of what's going on the ground. We give local school boards who are duly elected like us, many who receive more votes than most of us in larger districts, the ability to make those decisions. Now, talking about this amendment, Mr. Speaker, tutors. There's a reason why we're number 2, almost number 1 in the nation now in graduation rates. We're putting a lot of work into this. We're not allowing kids to fail. We're working them. We're making them come in. We had Saturday at my school a week ago last week, 60 kids show up. Tutors are all there, helping kids. They're helping them every day. They're helping them after school every day. They're helping them in the summer. Because I had that talk already. Those kids that you never knew when you're a kid growing up that dropped out, you can't do it anymore. Don't cut tutors out of this. I really urge you and beg you to not cut tutors out of this. And I think we got to just ask, what's our plan? I don't know. And I get it. We're all kind of prisoners of our upbringing, our experiences. But I think at some point, we got to think, are we really going there? Are we poor? What is our plan? What's the future of Wyoming look like? And so I really, we're sitting here at 40 million cuts. I'm with the majority floor leader. I think this is a process that's beginning in this house. We'll carry on to our brothers and sisters down the hall. And regardless, but I just don't think this is the right cut. And I don't think 100 million is the right number. And about 950 million of that 1.5 billion is a state resource. And so we got people taking percentages off the entire resource or some off the state resource like we did in the general fund. So what is that? And so I think we got to be really careful because there's 19,000 employees serving nearly 95,000 kids. You don't have a SIPA to move major maintenance in or 300 empty positions like you do on the general fund side. It's not the same. And so take each one of these, divide it by about 80,000. That's how many people are gone. There isn't this kind of money just laying around. They can't save it. Save 15%, and they have to have that for cash flow. Because you're in Campbell County or sublets, you only get paid twice a year. You got a cash flow the other 10 months. And so there's no big LSRA sitting around. And so, so I think urge caution. What do we really need to do? What do we want to do? And what should we do? And I would suggest we shouldn't do this. So I'm going to no on division number 1 and really appreciate everybody's debate on this. And this is huge for our state. So we got it's like a fifth of our citizens are in these schools. And so we got to work hard at this and roll our sleeves up. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So members, we're on division number 1. Speaking on division number 1, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against division number 1. And first to start with, what's recalibration? Recalibration is our obligation to meet our constitutional duty as has been outlined through the Washakie and Campbell decisions. And it's really, really specific about the importance of education and about what education means to our state. And it means something different than in virtually every other state, because the courts use language such as best system, equitable, that a kid in Sundance should have the same education as a girl in Laramie. That's the language that our Supreme Court used. That makes us different than virtually anywhere. And we should be proud of that that it doesn't make a difference how much money is in your zip code, right? We should be proud of that. And it's our obligation at a minimum of every 5 years to take a look at that educational model to make sure that we are meeting those goals. And then for the legislature to fund it. That's our obligation. And that's what we did. And that's what we are doing. At least every 5 years, we do that. We listen to the evidence. We spend hours and hours and hours going over the evidence. Because let's face it, every one of us individually has experience with education, both as students and often as parents and grandparents and as educators. We all have our views, but we have to look at the evidence. And this is the evidence. The evidence is about a model. And if you could look at this as an analogy of building a rocket ship, all right? And let's say your rocket ship can be built with nuts and bolts and or screws, right? 1 million nuts and bolts and 1 million screws, right? You can't say, for example, that you can pull out half the screws and not replace them with nuts and bolts. You can't do that. You need both of them. You can't pull out, in this case, tutors and not replace them. You just can't do it, or your product, in the case of a rocket ship, is going to crash. And in the case of the educational system, you are not going to have the same outcomes. Just because you have 1 million screws available doesn't mean that you can cut the nuts and bolts, right? So on and against this, and I urge you to think about each and every one of these decisions that we're making, not as individual level, all right? Because they're not, they fit together. Every one of these fits together. And you can't pull out one, honestly, without increasing another, if that's even possible. So on and against.
So members, I know this is difficult. And I appreciate that everybody wants to put context around it, but let's try to stick to the content of the amendments. And I appreciate the last 4 speakers all want to give the context to what we're doing here. But let's try to stay with the amendments if we can at all possible. That will hopefully expedite, well, it'll seem like we didn't miss 2 days if we continue at this pace. Representative Hallinan, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking on this amendment, I think it's an ingenious document. It shows the amount of people that are afforded by our block grant. And then it compares that to the number of people that actually perform these functions in our school districts. And if the product is so good, why would we want to change it? Why would we want to have more people doing these jobs than now perform them? I don't think we would. I think the amount of cut, I guess it's around 19 million that's represented by this amendment, division number 1. I think that's about a reasonable amount. And I salute my colleague for making this amendment available. I had another amendment earlier that I presented to the Education Committee that was not as well thought out as this one. And I'm glad to say that I support this division because it is a better cut than the one that I formed. So I would urge the body to approve this division as a down payment on the reductions that our school SFP is going to need to undergo. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Henderson on the amendment, Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the Division One amendment. No, vote no.
Any other member, first time, Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and on and for support of this amendment and some of the others. And I think, Mr. Chairman, as we talk about this, we hear about rocket ships and I'll go to cars. And I think the discussion that we've had, and I'm hoping that I'm not getting back into the weeds where the chairman doesn't want me to go, is that the consultant says the model you have is funded appropriately or not funded enough. So in order for us to make a change, we have to change the model. So we may need to go from a Cadillac with our funding source, what we've had, and go to a Buick. And that's what this amendment allows us to do. And you get across America just as great in a Buick as you can a Cadillac. You may not have all the butt warmers or some of the other stuff in there, but you'll get there. You'll do just fine. You'll succeed. And this amendment still provides for more than they're currently using, given a buffer there. I really think it's the right approach. If we're going to change, we have to change the model and then fund it accordingly and equitably, which is what is very important. Thank you. In support of the amendment.
Thank you. So just to remind the body, we try not to refer to brand names, whether they're the high end of the automobile world or not. So let's, I'll caution ourselves on that. Just take us, any other member for their first time? First time on Division One. First time, second time on Division One. Exhausted. For second time to the sponsor, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, folks, we're not cutting tutors. I love tutors. I value them. We are not cutting tutors. Let's go over the numbers real quick. There are currently 154 tutors employed in the state of Wyoming. This amendment, this division allows for 187. We're encouraging more tutors to be hired. So let's really talk about what goes on here. Remember, we discussed earlier that once we determine what the model is, we write a check to the districts and allow them to govern themselves. So really what we're talking about is developing a legally firm, solid foundation that we can suggest that we can are doing appropriate cuts that will stand up in a court of law. I'm referring to a document that was prepared by our senior staff attorney at LSO, that he compared all and had a look at all the court cases, all 5 of them that we've lost with the Wyoming Supreme Court. The Campbell 2 case, the court also held that, quote, the use of past statewide average expenditures to estimate the cost of education was appropriate. Campbell 2 tells us right there from the Supreme Court that looking at historic averages, what's the districts doing in the field is a legitimate way to recalibrate. So we're trying to find an earmark for these dollars. You can decide today how much you want. As the majority floor leader indicated, we're sitting at $40 million. You can do the math to decide how much this division is going to move us up to. With that, I encourage and I vote on Division 1.
Members, we're voting on second reading, amendment number 6, Division 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. All those in favor, please rise. And the members on the Zoom, okay. Thank you very much on Zoom. We've got your vote. 38, the division is adopted. Thank you. Representative Simpson, you are the divider. If you would like to proceed, Division 2, which is members, which is lines 20 through 26 on the first page of your amendment. Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Division 2 has to do with summer school. Please refer to your manila paper. I was curious about this. We often talk about the basket of goods, and the education community continues to tell us, quit adding to the basket of goods and not giving us any compensation. So I asked the question, what can we take away from the basket of goods? We recently added computer science. We don't want to take away math and reading. So what can we remove from the basket of goods? And I asked all the educators that I could find, and you know what, interesting, the one thing they suggested was summer school. I've never been to summer school. I'm sure summer schools are different in every single district. So I'm asking you to have a look at your own district. Do you feel like summer school is of value? Now, in the model, summer school is combined with another thing called extended day. And extended day means the school teachers stay after hours and work with kids. I would submit to you that that's very valuable. That's the feedback I've received. But the feedback I'm getting on summer school is it is not worth the bang for the buck. I'm just here to put it on the table for you. You can decide whether or not you feel like this is something that should be removed from the basket of goods. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members of any other members, Division 2, lines 22 through 26 on the page 1 of the amendment. Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And just one correction on that. Summer school is not part of the basket of goods. The basket of goods is the educational program. And so, yes, it's computer science, it's math, it's science, it's civics, it's fine and performing arts, there's a whole series of them. But what we're looking at is components within the funding model. And so, the argument's the same as before. You have to decide what you want to cut. We've cut 59 million now. And this one, I think, was around 3, maybe around 3, 7.2 million. So if we do this, we'll be at 66 million. So just giving the tally for you folks.
Other members for their first time Division 2, Representative Brown on Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't get up on the last amendment or the last division because I think the body spoke on that one, but this one I really feel is, if we're gonna really look at what we're wanting to cut, I think it's imperative just to look at the populations that are ultimately going to be affected. What you get with summer school are the kids that are the ones that fall behind, can't quite make it through to that next year, and they need that little bump. We're not talking about a massive amount of kids. I understand that. And I've struggled with this one myself. Okay, I really have. We're going to pay $7.2 million for a small group of children. Well, I would rather go ahead and pay that now than worry about what that impact is going to be in the future. $7.2 million when you're talking about a $300 million deficit is not going to solve us. Summer school could solve that kid's issue. Now, I think it's important to remember, just because we're cutting the funding doesn't mean that the school district's going to cut the programs, right? We've heard that over and over and over. We're just cutting money. The school district gets to do that. I can assure you that the summer school programs will feel the hit on this. Summer school is important. And again, it's not to every student. It's to those that have the challenges and that need that bump to get to the next grade. Whether it's like they did this past year in this county where they bring them forward and they give them that extra 6 weeks right before school, or whether they do it in a lot of the other school districts where it's summer school right after the end of school to keep them engaged, to make sure that they retain enough information as they go through to the next year. This is a very critical component, and this is one that I feel strongly about, and I will ask for a no vote on this. A lot of these others, I've worked with the bringer of the amendment on this. I'm not opposed to a lot of these others, but this one I really, really am. I can assure you that the way that these school boards work in a lot of places it's unfortunate because it hits the ones that need it the most. So I'm going to ask you to vote no on this one. Probably won't hear a whole bunch more from me in regards to this, to these amendments, but this one I really feel strongly about, and I hope you heed the warning, because you're going to pay for it now, or we're going to pay for it later twice as much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Duncan, first time Division II, second reading, number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just quick question to the bringer of the amendment. Are any title funds available for summer school? How are are these all being paid directly out of the budget of the school, or do they qualify for title funds for a lot of these same kiddos in summer school? Thank you.
Any other members, first time Division II? First time Division II. Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sorry, it seems like I'm adding my 2 cents an awful lot, and I apologize for that. But these things also are dear to me, and kind of watching. And while I cannot say what goes on in every district, because I don't know, every board's different, every population is different, I can say that summer school has changed over the years. Years ago, it was to help you. They provided it right after the grades, especially after 5th grade. They provided it so that if you were failing, that you could catch up and pass that grade on to the next one. That is not particularly the case right now, at least in my experience. A lot of the things that go on these days are extracurricular activities. They go boating, or they go do things like that. Also, if it's right after the school year, the retention from June until August is very low, is very, very low. So teachers usually spend the first couple weeks reviewing things and getting things. And, you know, that would be the same anywhere. But I would just say, while summer school has proved over the years to be advantageous to some, there are also summer programs, a lot of boys and girls clubs, a lot of parents, now that they've been homeschooling, are a lot more aware of where their children are and where they need to be. And I would vote no on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members, first time Division II? First time Division II. Representative Burt?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm still on the fence on this one, not necessarily for or against just yet. A couple things that maybe could kind of sway my mind on this. One, how many counties are affected if we were to, I guess not necessarily counties, I guess how many students overall within the state would be affected if we remove summer schools from the program? And the fact, if we just looked at Division I, we just passed, we still have an allocation of 33 tutors that are still available in the funding. Could we find a balance between the summer school issue and the 33 tutors that we still have the funding available for? So I guess I'm still, like I said, still on the fence on how we maybe work Division I, Division II together. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other member, Division II? Representative Kenner?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And a question for the bringer of the amendment. So the $7.2 million reduction. So my question is that amount just subtracted from the block grant? So then it's up to the individual school districts to continue these summer school programs if they'd like to, and that this isn't specifically taking money away from that. It's just reducing the block grant, and it's up to the school districts. I'd like that answered, please.
Thank you. Representative Conley, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And a question for the bringer of the amendment, if he has any evidence about how many school children would fall enough behind if they don't attend summer school that they would then be eligible for special ed.
Any other member, first time on Division Two? Any other members, first time? Second time, Division Two, second time before the sponsor, second time to the sponsor, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good questions. I do not know if there's federal funds available that could be used to subsidize summer school. I do not know how many kids are affected. Every district is different and every year is going to be affected. I do believe that summer school will be eliminated. This is one of those, this isn't just a budget cut. When we take away summer school funding, I doubt there will be very few districts that will fund it out of their slush fund. So you need to take that in consideration. I think the summer school will go away if you vote aye on this. We have a large deficit, folks. I don't know what to tell you. I don't want to damage kids at all. I'm bringing you these amendments because I'm sensing that we need to have this kind of debate as to what are we really doing with education and how are we going to manage this deficit. So because I brought it forward, I'm going to encourage you to vote aye on the division number 2.
Members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 6, Division 2. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment has not been adopted. Division 3, Representative Simpson. And just for the body, Division 3 is a multi-part division. It's lines 1 through 3, page 1, 27 through 42, page 1, lines 1 through 5, page 2, and lines 8 through 32, page 2. Did I express that accurately, sponsor?
You did, Mr. Speaker.
All right, please continue, please proceed.
Members, we've debated this issue earlier today. Amendment number 2 talked about removing 5 teacher development days from the contract. This concept was brought to me by teachers. A teacher said to me, I used to live in a state and a district where they had to go through cuts, and the superintendent and the school board decided to reduce everyone's salary, but they kept our work days the same. And they said that was a morale challenge for the teachers because they were getting the deduct without and still having to work the same amount of days. So he says, if we're going to cut education, release us from the number of days so that I can go to my summer job and generate revenue on the summer job. So that's what this is all about. If we're going to cut deep, let's free our teachers up so that they can generate revenue on another day. There was a question earlier about, is this really after their teacher development days or is it after classroom days? The way this is worded, we're reducing the total number of contract days by 3 days. Elsewhere in the rules and the statutes, it dictates how many classroom days, and that day stays the same. So therefore it comes out of the teacher development days. So we're reducing from 10 down to 7 teacher development days with this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. On Division 3, any other members for their first time? First time, Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, that he is right. I finally got the correct site. And so 214301 actually puts in statute that it's 175 school days. And so then the 185 days it would include the contract days. So if you subtract down, then you are in fact just subtracting down those professional development days. And you know, this is another decision. We're at 59 million. The last one wasn't passed. So if you pass this, we're at 68 million. And you know, one note, and I know it was brought up, and that is this idea of what is 10%. What is a 10% cut? So the model, and I know I explained this at the beginning, but the guarantee includes both the local funding and the state funding. And that's, local funding is all property taxes for the most part. There's, a few little dollars in that from fines and such. And then the state share is some property tax, some recapture. So my district has more money than other districts, so they take it away, give back to the entitlement districts. And then there are some other statewide dollars, obviously LISRA dollars now. And so 10%, 100 million is about 10% of the state share, not the 150 million, which is 10% of the whole guarantee. So the amount that the state puts in. And I just think we go much below, I said it, 60, 70 million. It's just, I think we're going too far. So, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Banks, for your first time, Division 3, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, on and against Division 3, we already burdened our teachers with a tremendous amount of extra time, extra effort that we're asking them to put into their classrooms. My ex-wife is a teacher, and I can tell you she easily put in a good 30 days that was unpaid prior to school, over breaks, after hours, on weekends, preparing her classroom, making sure her students had what they needed, spending money out of their own pocket. This amendment equates to a pay cut for those teachers. Admittedly, it is a reduction in hours, but at the end of the year, those teachers are going to see that reflected in what they take home. And I think it sends the wrong message to those teachers that we don't value them as much and that we don't value them for what they're worth. So on and against the division.
Thank you. Other members for their first time? Representative Hallinan, first time, Division 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Naturally, I'm for this amendment as I was in favor of 5 days being reduced from this professional development portion of the school year. I think that it's only fair that we would look at what is best for our entire state in terms of how much we can afford. In 2006, that's when this was increased to 10 days. And we got along fairly well without that up to that time. And I believe that my colleague, the sponsor of this bill, has done his diligence in interviewing teachers to see where they could see a cut coming and where they would be willing to accept it. I think this does not reduce their salary per hour. It just reduces the number of days that they would need to develop to send for this professional development. And with that in mind, I think it's a fair way of dealing with this deficit that we're facing. So with that, I would urge your support of this division. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, members. We are in Division 3. Division 3. Any other member for their first time? Chairman Harshman, first time.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Just to give a little information, it's actually your local school board sets your calendar for your local school district. My school district, it's 188 days. I think Teton's 187. We've never been 175, right? And so I think if you reduce this 3 days or 5 days or whatever, that doesn't mean your district's going to cut 3 or 5 days off. I mean, that's all a local decision. It's whether what you're going to fund is the issue. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other member, first time, Division 3? First time, Division 3. Any other members? Seeing none. Second time, Division 3. Second time, Division 3 to the sponsor, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, just to remember, we turned away the earlier request for 5 days. So that's buried and done with. This is just 3 days is what we're asking here. I'm indifferent. It's an option. It was brought to me by teachers, and so I put it on the table. If we're going to reduce their salaries, I'd rather reduce their days along with it. And so it's an option for us to consider. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recommend an aye vote on this division.
Thank you, members. We are voting on second reading of amendment number 6, Division 3. Division 3. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Chair has no doubt, no idea. All those in favor, please stand. Thirty-six, the amendment, the division is adopted. We're on division number 4. Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just to affirm, division number 4 is page 2, lines 33 through 47, and all of page 3. Page 2, bottom 33 through 47, and page 3. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage you to go to your bill for this one, members. This is not on the yellow sheet. This is a discussion on concerning how much we're going to carry over and what we're going to do in the next year or two. So here's the thought. It makes sense to me that we want to give the school districts an ability to carry more money over from this year to help them with the cuts. And so currently, they're able to carry over 15% of their annual payment. 15% is what they're able to keep in the reserves to carry over. This amendment extends that to 20%. So I'm encouraging an additional 5% of their annual allotment. Now, what does that really equate to? So we're currently at, I don't have the numbers, but roughly around 5% cuts right now is where we're sitting on the bill. So if we allow districts to carry over 5%, they could take the money they've saved because of the shortened school year and the CARES Act money, the stuff that they have in their savings account right now, they're able to carry over literally the equivalent of what we're planning to cut to them. That's a big deal to the districts. It means that they can literally stretch the cuts over 2 years instead of having to implement them in the next 30 days and make some difficult choices. Currently 173, I'll let the majority floor leader tell you what it does, but it gives a lot more latitude with a lot more time frame to do that. But I would submit to you if the cuts are 5% and we give them an extra 5% carryover, it makes sense that they can accomplish what they needed to in 1 year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any member of their first time, Representative Summers. First time, division 4.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against this division. So the reason I went to 25 in this is at the request of the department that runs education. They're not sure, quite how much federal money is going to come in this next pile or what it's going to look like. But their concern was if we, and this was actually the percentage that they requested. So if we have 25% in that and bleed it over 5 years, we're not making districts try to find places to spend money. And so the idea was when I originally thought of this and districts had asked for it, it was really to help phase in the cuts. But that department came to me and said, we'd really like to see 25% to bleed these federal dollars in over the course of years and not force immediate spending. And then on the 3-year phase in, but by the time a bill is signed, we're going to be past the contract point for districts. And I think it just makes sense to phase this cut in over about a 3-year period. So I would appreciate your no vote on this division. Thank you.
Any other member, first time division, Representative Brown, first time division 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just echo again what the majority floor leader just said. If we adopt this amendment, in essence, what we're saying is school districts, if you get a whole bunch of money from the federal bucket that's just got approved, and you're going to get this state guarantee, albeit it's going to be reduced with this bill, you've got to spend all of it no matter what. You can't carry anything extra in your reserves. Spend, 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 spend. That's what we're telling them. With this amendment, that's what you're telling them. Defeating this says, hey, look, be thrifty. If you can carry over a couple extra bucks and you have some places to cut back and bleed into reserves and you can spend some federal money as opposed to the state guarantee, do that. Bleed it into the state guarantee and then hold on to that for 5 years. In committee, I even made the motion to just say, hey, we need to make sure that this money does not go past that 5 years. After 5 years, I guarantee this body is still going to be debating education funding. But what's going to happen is we're going to be able to spend those federal dollars and it's not going to be frivolous spending. With this amendment, that's what we are encouraging is frivolous spending. Without this amendment, you're encouraging thriftiness. Put away an extra couple bucks if you can. Find a way to save that extra nickel and dime. And then when time comes up to it and you guys have that shortfall, you've got some reserves over the next 5 years to bleed this in. So on and against.
Thank you. Chairman Wilson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually want to repeat what the last two speakers have said and encourage a no vote. And the reason I'm getting up to be so repetitious is because if you've looked around, you'll see that I've actually stood up on the I votes a lot of times, and I've certainly been sharpening my little red pencil. But this is to enable the districts to be thrifty and look ahead is a very good thing. So I see no reason at all to discourage that behavior in our children or in the school districts. So I would say vote no.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time, Division 4. First time. Second time to the sponsor, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's really two concepts here. There's the one of how much retainage we carry over. And then there's a second concept of phasing in the cuts. So currently the cuts are phased in over 3 years. In retrospect, I wish I would have divided those because I think we're all in favor of allowing the districts to carry over as much as they can, but we're in a serious deficit, and to take the cuts and divide them over 3 years isn't really helping our savings account any. But so I encourage you to vote aye on this division.
Members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 6, Division 4. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. We're now at on Division 5, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you've been troopers. Thank you for hanging in there and focusing and concentrating. Members, it's never been my intention to slash education at will and just cut into the bone. I love my school district. I love what they do for the program. It's only because the calibration committee composed of House members and Senate members made the decision that we should cut $100 million from the program. That was what, and I'm supporting that to no end. We're now to the last division. RCA is a complicated issue, and we now have 50 total cuts. We think we're at $68 million on the cuts. I'm going to close the debate here, folks. I think we're at the good spot that we can progress and start communicating with the chamber on the other end. And so I'm going to recommend on division number 5, the RCA, that you vote no on it. Thank you.
Discussion on division number 5, Representative Hallinan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to vote against this division because of its excessive cost to several counties and districts around the state. Campbell County will lose $3 million if we pass this amendment or pass this division. I think that Natrona County will lose about $5 million. And I think that is probably more than we can afford to reduce just in one time. So for that reason, I'd say that we should vote against this amendment. I believe Laramie County would lose a similar $5 million by passing this division. So if the counties that are affected by this want to see their districts lose that kind of money, they should support this division. But if they don't, they would be against it. And for that reason, I'm against this division. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Summers, first time, Division 5.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against the amendment. And really, the RCA is a kind of a quagmire, but it's basically been accepted by all the districts in the ratios that exist. And really, the last speaker said it. If you would disrupt the RCA, then you're really going to have winners and losers. When you bring out the district by district comparison, you're going to see huge discrepancies in percentage cuts between districts, because this RCA kind of is the glue that holds the whole thing together. So on and against the division.
Anyone else against the division? Anyone else want to speak against the division? Representative Schwartz for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against, the whole notion of equitable funding throughout the state goes away without the regional cost adjustment. On and against.
Any other member, first time, second time to the sponsor, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I came this morning, I had a bag and it had about 4 pounds of political collateral in it. And I have completely drained that bag. I have none left. And so you've done good work today. Thank you for considering everything. I encourage you to vote no on this division.
Members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 6, House Bill 173, Division 5. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The division has not been adopted. So I just want to affirm, Chief Clerk, what do you have for? So we have adopted Division 1 and Division 3 of the second reading amendment number 6. Thank you. Without much debate, I might add. We're on to division, second reading amendment number 7. Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading amendment number 7 to House Bill 173 and ask for your favorable consideration. What does amendment number 7 do? It repeals the data center sales tax exemption and redirects the state portion of the share to the school foundation program. So right now we have 4 data centers in our state, 4 taxpayers who right now don't pay any sales tax, right? Where does that money go? Mostly out of state. What this says is that before we start raising taxes on everybody in the state, we ought to close our tax loopholes, and this is one of them. So I think this is an easy amendment to vote for. The industry does not appear to need this. Our neighboring state to the south does not have a data center sales tax exemption at all. It has 41 data centers, 41, 10 times as many as we do. That makes sense. It also has 10 times the population. But what does that tell you? It tells you that this data center sales tax exemption is not the deciding factor. And indeed, one of our own companies here in our capital city that has a data center. How important is this data center sales tax exemption? How crucial is it? It's so crucial to them that they have built a data center in Colorado that has no data center sales tax exemption. They also have one in New Jersey that has no data center sales tax exemption. So I think that tells you that inside, when they're for the business model for these data centers, this sales tax exemption, it's nice icing on the top that goes to their investors and gives them a juicier reward, but it's not really a deciding factor for them. California, by the way, also has no data center sales tax exemption. California has 234 data centers. So With that, it's time to repeal this anachronistic 10-year-old data center sales tax exemption. Repeal this and it'll add about $9 million. So $9 million to the good. Again, doesn't solve our $300 million annual problem, but it pushes us one step closer. And I ask for an aye vote.
Any member for their first time, second reading amendment number 7? Representative Summers, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. You know, I believe this was a bill that came this session and maybe got defeated and then was brought back in. You know, it is sales tax. So whether an exemption, you know, I don't know, but y'all are gonna have to make your decision. This is a bill that's now brought as an amendment. I'm gonna probably vote against this bill.
Representative Henderson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess I'm having trouble making the connection here with regard to the germaneness of this, but I'll leave it to the body. I'm going to vote against this because it makes no sense. We already spent a lot of valuable time looking into the purpose of the exemption, which is not germane to the discussion here, but the sales tax there's no control over that. And we spent a lot of time today talking about stuff in the model, which we have some control over, which does make some sense, which makes a lot of sense. And I think the couple of amendments that we did approve relative to the bill itself, I think are germane, but this I don't think is, and I'd ask you to vote no.
Representative Schwartz, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. I think if we're going to have a discussion about sales tax exemptions, this is not the context in which to do it. I would love to have that conversation and look at all of the exemptions potentially and have a consistent discussion about what our policy should be. This is not the place to do it. On and against.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time, second reading amendment number 7? Representative Olson, Chairman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment for a lot of the reasons that have been stated, but I do want to push back a little bit on the policy consideration that this amendment brings, that the exemption isn't necessary for the data center to exist in my county in particular. Number one, I'll say that the existence of that data center is pretty big for my county. It's the largest property tax contributor in this county. So that's a pretty big chunk of money that flows in. I know we're talking about the sales tax, but I'm pointing out that there's another tax benefit to the county that does exist. And I'll push back on the notion of comparing us to our neighbors to the south in terms of data center numbers. There's a lot of variables in there, you know, that come into consideration. One is how many higher institutions exist in the state south of us that produce these varying tech degrees that are necessary to work in the data center. 2 is the population. 3 is the unemployment rates. I mean, the culture is another one. So the idea that Wyoming is going to be home to 100 data centers or even 40 isn't the point of the exemption. One data center alone in my county provides the largest payer of property tax in our county. So I think one did it did its trick. If you had a second one, that would be a blessing in terms of taxation to the county. So I do want to push back on that notion. I think if we want to have a debate about that taxation, I think that would be more appropriate because I too don't understand the nexus between sales taxation exemptions and what we're discussing in House Bill 173. So on and against the amendment.
Thank you. Representative Clausen, first time, number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment, if we're going to broaden our tax base, we're going to have to do it, and this is a place to start.
Any other member first time? Any other member first time? The undivided 7th Amendment to 173, second reading. Any other member, first time, second time? To the sponsor, Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, I would respond. It is true that data centers pay property tax, but if we pass this amendment, what are they going to do? Are they going to their data centers on casters and roll them down the interstate? I don't think so. They're still going to pay their property tax. So please vote aye.
Members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 7, House Bill 173. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Members, you're going to have to stand because it's a lopsided room on that vote. So all those in favor, please rise, and all those on the Zoom, please raise your hand if you're in favor of the amendment. In favor of the amendment? Okay, thank you. All those opposed? And I need everyone, if you're in the room and you want to vote opposed, please stand and stay standing. Six individuals not voting. The amendment has been adopted, 29-25. Next amendment for consideration is second reading of number 8, Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading amendment number 8 to House Bill 173 and ask for your favorable consideration. So here's what this amendment does. It says that if your school has fewer than 13 students on average, then you get funded for a teacher, you get funded for a clerical worker, but you don't get an assistant principal. Because right now, for example, in my county, there's a school that has an ADM, an average daily membership of 1.5. Okay, so 1.5 students show up each day. And in the funding model, right now, the district gets paid for the teacher, for a clerical worker, and the district gets paid $101,000 for an assistant principal. Well, think about that school. This assistant principal does not exist. This is a ghost principal, right? There are, by my count, according to the funding model spreadsheet, there appear to be, I believe, 22 schools that would be affected by this, 22 schools across the state that have fewer than 13 ADM. So basically we're saying we're not going to fund ghost principals. And the total dollar impact to this is about $2.2 million because it's 22 schools times $101,000. I think this is a no-brainer. We're not telling those schools they have to shut down. We're saying, hey, you can have a teacher, you can have a secretary. But if there are only 12 students there, do you really need an assistant principal? By the way, that assistant principal doesn't exist, so we're not going to fund your non-existent principal. So ask for your aye vote.
Any member on for their first time, number 8, Representative Summers, first time 2008.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So this is small schools, right? And typically small schools have a harder time operating anyway. And so we're just going to take more resources away from small schools that have a harder time operating. And so I'm on and against this amendment.
Any other member first time? Any other member first time? Representative Gray.
First for a second. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against.
Any other member first time? First time, Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question for the bringer of the amendment. Would this affect alternative schools in that same way? Because I know some of our alternative schools are a little bit on the small side, and I'm curious as to the effect on that. Thank you.
Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I guess to those who are suggesting a no vote, I'd like to have further explanation because as we've talked about, the funding formula is just a math problem, really, and a math assignment. The districts are not obliged to spend in this way, and I suspect that they don't. In my district, I actually, even right here in this county, there actually is one. It had, when I visited them about a year and a half ago, I read them Green Eggs and Ham in Spanish, and they have 12 students. It's a great little school. It has 2 rooms, has 1 teacher, 1 aide, 12 kids. It's great. I mean, I would have loved to gone there. They don't have a principal. I'm really sure of that. I don't know where you would have put the principal in there. So I guess the concern that I'm under-resourcing them, I mean, I don't think the district is using that principal money on that school anyway. So if that could just be explained.
Thank you. Representative Duncan, Vice Chair Duncan, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the bringer of the amendment. In my area, we have several small schools and they tend to share a principal. Does sharing a principal, does that equate to a ghost principal? Because the funding may be coming from several schools, but the principal isn't necessarily allocated to that specific school. They go from school to school to school throughout the week. So if you could clarify that for me.
Any other member for their first time? Member for their first time? Member for their first time, second time, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to speak in favor of this amendment and thank the bringer. It's delicately and tenderly crafted and just, I think it's a cost-based model. And so sometimes we get in circles. Either it's not cost-based or it's cost-based. And we've heard it's cost-based, and this is a targeted reduction that is an inefficiency, and it's delicately crafted. And let's vote aye on this. And thank you.
Any of the members, second time, Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against the amendment. And, you know, it's hard to tell where we're at in cuts because everything's interrelated. We'll hopefully get something from our staff after the second reading. But, you know, ballpark, we go over 70 million with this. And then you look at the fact that our consultant they said that our constitutional mandate was 20 million more than our legislative model. So now, you know, we're approaching over 90 million cuts, you know, 90 million in cuts below what probably is our constitutional model. And I really still don't think it's appropriate to take away from small schools. So on and against.
Other members for their second time, we're on second time before the sponsor, second time. To the sponsor, Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. With respect to the question about alternative schools, it's my understanding from consulting with our education funding maven from District 20 that alternative schools are funded from a different resource allocation and would not be affected by this amendment, which is, I trust his judgment on that one. As far as how this affects small schools, I have a special place in my heart for small schools. My mother grew up in the Dust Bowl in Kansas in the 1930s and went to a one-room schoolhouse where there were only 3 students, one of whom was her brother. And so I think there's a certain value to these small schools. The purpose of this amendment is not to get rid of the small schools, but it is to say, just as for my mother's school in the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, they had a teacher, but they didn't have an assistant principal watching over them. So I think this works. And in terms of justifying this, in case this bill comes before the judicial branch on a challenge someday, we can justify this particular amendment pretty easily by saying, look, it's adequate for a teacher to be able to supervise 12 students. So on 4, ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Members, we're voting on second reading, amendment number 8, House Bill 173. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment has not been adopted. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. Thank you, online members. We have your votes. Not you guys. In the room, please stand. Please stand. Please stand. Still. So apparently our votes are changing a bit. We started at one page. We're at 39 right now. So the amendment has been adopted. So second reading of number 8 has been adopted. Next one is number 9, Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, as much as I would like to talk more, I respectfully withdraw amendment number 9.
Number 9 is withdrawn. We're on to number 10, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully bring Second Amendment reading number 10 to House Bill number 173 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this is a pretty simple amendment. What it does is it calls for the superintendent to prepare a report after all this is said and done and let us know what the results are, whether we make cuts or we not make cuts. I think we've all heard before that budgets are people. And at the end of the day, we should take ownership for what we do and the results of what we end up doing. So what this does is it calls for a report. It asks for each district to give us the title, the job description, the salary, and the length of employment of anybody who is involuntarily laid off. Now, I would just let you know that some people have come to me and said that I should expand, or the window should be expanded for the time. That's fine. Bring that as a third reading amendment. And also the terminology as to what an involuntary layoff is. Again, that's fine. I'm just bringing it as a second reading amendment, so there's no surprise. And again, ultimately, what it is taking ownership of what we as a body end up doing. And who knows what will happen at the end of everything after this bill is worked. But if there are cuts, I think we should know what the results are. So thank you.
Any member for the first time, Representative Brown, first time amendment 10, 173.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess more just a question on procedure here. The amendment says that the state superintendent's going to do this, and I'm just curious, maybe just a little bit of some language change here might help, but that seems like an awfully big task. And usually this type of information is not relayed up to the superintendent. This is done at the school board level. So I'm wondering if maybe we can look at some different language. This seems like it's more syntax than it is anything, but I would just ask the bringer of the amendment if he has had that discussion with any of the school districts as opposed to the superintendent.
Representative Summers, first time amendment 10.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I don't know how many reports are generated out of K-12. So you were going to ask to have another one generated? I mean, come on and against.
Any other member first time? Members first time? Members first time? Second time? Second time to the sponsor, Representative McGuire.
Thank you. And I have to apologize. I missed a little bit of the second question, but I have not brought this to my local school district. But either way, if it's the will of the body, if it moves forward on third reading, I will increase the window of time and change the definition. So thank you. Ask for your favorable consideration.
Members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 10 to 173. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. I have no idea. All those in favor, please rise. Online, any of you vote aye? All right, 31 votes, the amendment has been adopted. Just so you know, I did ask permission with our chief clerk and our reading clerk whether I could take that first barrier down. They gave me permission until I start sputtering and then they'll put it back up. So I did check with them. So amendment number 10 has been adopted, 31. Next amendment is number 11. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd move second reading amendment number 11 to House Bill 173. And members, this is on the, there's this insurance policy tax that we say would kick in at 650 million, the LSRA drop, but then what if the boom comes back? And so that's what this is. If the LSRA would then grow back to 1.2 billion, then that tax would come off, that penny for education. So if it ever did 4 or 5 years from now, get kicked on, something happens big, right? I got some big ideas too to generate revenue. Let's talk about them next session. Then the tax would go away. Stand for any questions.
Members, any member for the first time, 11? First time on second reading of 11? Representative Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great idea, but I'm just curious about the 1.2 billion where 650 is the threshold to kick it in. Is there anything significant about why we would need 1.2 billion before we could possibly consider taking it off?
Thank you. Any other member first time? Any other member first time? Amendment, second reading amendment number 11. Any other member first time? Second time to the sponsor, Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just really kind of little league math, thinking if we had another 300 million a year type deficit, then that would give us a couple of years to start figuring it out again. So that was it. Thank you.
Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 11, House Bill 173. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Chief Clerk, is this our last amendment? Thank you. 12. Okay. We're on second reading number 12. Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd like to move second reading amendment number 12 to House Bill 173 and ask for your favorable consideration. So our staff came to me today and said they needed a technical correction in the bill. So this is a technical correction.
Any technical discussion on the technical correction to the bill? Any discussion? Seeing none. We are voting on second reading amendment number 12, House Bill 173. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed say no. The amendment is adopted. House Bill 173, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing 12 amendments divided multiple times and no other objections, it is so ordered. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the consent list consisting of the following bills. House Bills 79, 96, 112, 116, 144, 163, 174, 212. And Mr. Speaker, the 136 was left off because I guess it had an amendment. I haven't seen.
Okay, but any member like any of the bills, we're on that order of business with third reading and final passage consent list. Would any member like a bill removed from the consent list? Removed from the consent list? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'd like House Bill 174 removed from the consent list.
174 is removed from the consent list. Representative Harshman.
Mr. Speaker, Rule 7-3, I'd move to lay House Bill 174 back one additional day.
It's a motion to move House Bill 174 back an additional day. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 174 is now removed from the consent list and laid back one day. Any other removals from the consent list? Removals from the consent list. So our consent list consists of House Bill 79, 96, 112, 116, 144, 163, and 212. Reading clerk.
House Bill 79, sponsored by Representative Duncan, subdivisions, an act relating to real estate subdivisions, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 96, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd, treatment of animals, an act relating to animals, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 112, sponsored by Representative Clausen, lifetime pioneer trapper's license, an act relating to game and fish, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 116, sponsored by Representative Wharf, concealed carry residency requirement 2, an act relating to concealed weapons, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 144, sponsored by Representative Brown, electric vehicle fee updates, an act relating to multi-purpose vehicles, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 163, sponsored by Representative McGuire, federal congressional elections residency, an act relating to elections, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 212, sponsored by Representative Provenza, criminal record expungement revisions, an act relating to criminal procedure, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 79, 96, 112, 116, 144, 163, and 212, having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall these bills pass the House? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call on the consent. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn.
Aye.
Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson.
Aye.
Harshman. 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 Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer.
Aye.
Mr. Speaker, we have 60 aye. As for House Bill 79, are there any changes? Sweeney? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 60 aye. As for House Bill 96, are there any changes? Hunt, aye to no. Clausen, aye to no. Andrew, aye to no. Martinez? Larson Dan, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Wharf, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 51 aye, 9 no. As for House Bill 112, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Brown, aye to no. Yin, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 58 aye, 2 no. As for House Bill 116, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Yin, aye to no. Schwartz, aye to no. Clifford, aye to no. Connolly, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 56 aye, 4 no. As for House Bill 144, are there any changes? Olson, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Olson, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote.
I'd like to change.
Thank you. Haroldson, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 57 aye, 3 no. As for House Bill 163, are there any changes? Brown, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Haroldson, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 57 aye, 3 no. And as for House Bill 212, are there any changes? Washit, aye to no. Simpson, aye to no. McGuire, aye to no. O'Hearn, aye to no. Gray, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Burkhart, aye to no. Nyman, aye to no. Clausen, aye to no. Air, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Newsom, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Flitner, aye to no. Summers, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 41 aye, 19 no.
Members, by your vote, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 79, 96, 112, 116, 144, 163, and 212 have passed the House. We have one bill on third reading, regular list. Third reading and final passage. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 136.
House Bill 136, sponsored by Representative Yin, inclusive ballot language, an act relating to elections being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have an amendment. Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 136, and I ask for your favorable consideration. This is a simple grammatical cleanup, and I'm right, so vote aye.
I was expecting a point of order about that. Representative Yin, for your first time.
The chairwoman is right. Vote aye.
Any other member for their first time want to contradict the chairman? Any other member, first time, second time? Members, we're voting on third reading. Amendment number 1, House Bill 136. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Good choice for the chairman. So House Bill 136, having been read three separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson,
No.
Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer.
Aye.
Mr. Speaker. Blackburn.
No.
Closing vote. Are there any changes? Harshman, no to aye. Andrew, aye to no. Hallinan, aye to no. Further changes? Ottman? No to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 40 aye, 20 no.
House Bill 136, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 136 has passed the House. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
Members, you've heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Representative Hunt, come on down.
Alrighty. We'll get to work. House will please come to order. All right. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 115. Reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 115, sponsored by Representative Paxton, big or trophy game animal. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 115, big or trophy game animal minimum hunting age, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Flitner, Haroldson, Hunt, Jennings, Newsom, Winter. Noes, Representatives Banks, Knapp, Sweeney. Representative Flintner, Chairman.
Alrighty, you've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman? Well, yeah, okay, Chairman Flintner. My apologies. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 115 do pass. And with an explanation of the bill, I will hand it off to the good chairman of committee number 4.
Representative Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you've been waiting all day long for a nice, easy bill, this is it. The entire bill is just really at the very bottom of page 1. The minimum age to take any big game or trophy game animal is 12 years. And this is where the bill begins, except that any person may take a big or trophy game animal at 11 years of age if the person will attain 12 years of age by the end of the calendar year. And that's the bill. Be willing to take any questions.
Any questions for the debate? All right, question having been called. All those in favor of Chairman Flintner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 115 do pass, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. House Bill 115 is passed, committee of the whole. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 120. Reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 120, sponsored by Representative Flitner, Hathaway Scholarships. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4 Education, to whom is referred House Bill 120, Hathaway Scholarships, Success Curriculum in Middle School. Respectful report, same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Brown, Connolly, Harshman, Nyman, Obermueller, Paxton, Summers. Excused, Representative Newsom. Representative Paxton, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Paxton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 120 do pass, and turn the explanation of the bill over to the good chairman of TRW. You're it.
Thank you. Going in reverse order from the last bill, Chairman Flintner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 120, Hathaway Scholarship Success Curriculum in Middle School. This would allow those students who are so inclined to begin earning Hathaway credits in all subject matter beginning in middle school. This is an entirely permissive bill and provides school districts the tool to begin offering those courses if students, parents, and trustees believe that they can make this work in their district. Presently, prior to 9th grade, a Wyoming student can begin earning Hathaway credits in math, foreign language, CTE, and fine arts. This bill expands their opportunity to begin earning Hathaway credits for all coursework pre-9th grade. So we'll go through the bill because it's kind of hard to understand the language. Page 1, line 12 is our statute notation. We begin amending subsection B as noted on line 14. This subparagraph is language specific to success curriculum requirements to qualify for honor or performance scholarship eligibility. Moving on to page 2, Romanet 8, we begin our changes. On line 6, we roll in language arts in Romanet 2, and then we go through Romanet 4, which is social studies. This new language excludes mathematics, which is Romanet 1, and electives, which is Romanet 7, and those courses are already allowed pre-9th grade. Moving on to line 16, Romanet D, or subsection D rather, begins language specific to success curriculum requirements for opportunity scholarship eligibility. Line 22, Romanet 7 is new language but it simply repeats the same as that above, but for the Opportunity Scholarship. The numerical differences are just that there are no elective offerings for Opportunity. You'll note page 3, line 4, the word may. That may is also found on page 2, line 11, and page 3, line 19, just to reiterate that this is an entirely permissive bill. New language is also found on page 3, beginning with line 15 through 20, and this speaks to the Provisional Opportunity Scholarship. Page 4, line 1, section 2 is our effective date. There is no fiscal note, and I would stand for any questions.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none and question being called, all those in favor of Chairman Paxton's motion, that when the committee of the whole rise to report, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 120 do pass. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right, House Bill 120 has passed the committee of the whole. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 188. Reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 188, sponsored by Representative Hunt, Irrigation District Loans. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 188, Irrigation District Loans, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation of the due pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Eklund, Fortner, Heiner, Larson Dan, Western, Winter, excused, Representative Wharf. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
For the reading of the bill, what is your pleasure? Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 188 do pass. There is a standing committee amendment. I'll move that as well, and we'll dispense with it right off the bat. We tried to clear up some language on page 2, line 2, after replacement, insert, or major maintenance, to be clear on the bill. And I ask for an aye vote on that.
Okay, any discussion on the standing committee amendment? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 188, please say aye. Those opposed? Standing committee amendment is adopted. We're back on the bill.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I would turn the bill over to the sponsor from the northwest corner.
Thank you, Chairman Eklund. Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Folks, I bring to you House Bill 188. This is just an issue with irrigation district loans. And this is just briefly, it's a continuing effort of giving options to irrigation districts that we've been working on over the past couple of years, mainly in light of the Goshen County Canal collapse of a couple summers ago. And so simply what this bill does is would allow our SLIB board, our Board of State Electeds, to grant loans to irrigation districts. They currently cannot do that. Currently, they do have accounts and funds that can go for drinking water for municipalities, but irrigation districts are excluded from that. And just in case there's any concern about competition there, this is sort of being brought as it's a loan of last resort, if you will. This isn't like a go-to pot of money. It's simply saying that if there's nowhere else that irrigation district can get their money from, they can go to that board of folks and make a request. And this is, we're putting language in there that says this is strictly for replacement projects and for major maintenance, again, for crumbling infrastructure. So that's the essence of the bill, and I'd stand for any question. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Larson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the good presenter must have been reading my mind, because I don't see any language in there that says that this is an option of last resort. It falls into the same conversation if you look at the statute as your cities, towns, and counties, and your in those that are being funded now through the SLIB board. And these are funds that come out of our Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. And so we have the state revolving fund, we have and we have some of these other water funding things. I know that the interest rate is higher. But will this, as I read it, this will has the ability to circumvent those higher places, and we know that those aren't being used as much because our locals would much rather get a grant or a lower interest rate. And so this appears to me to be a lower interest rate and would be a means whereby irrigation districts could have access to it, but I don't see where it's a loan of last resort. And so if he can show me that language and help me understand where I'm missing that, I'd appreciate that. And then I'm also curious as to why all political subdivisions. I mean, is there a reason we don't just include everybody? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Hunt, why don't you answer this?
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. And let me clarify for the good member of appropriations that, no, there's no language in here that's calling it a loan of last resort. But where these folks typically go to is our water development money. And so there's already that avenue, obviously, that they can go to. They can go through the State Commission on Water Development and go through that process and apply. But if for whatever reason, there's an urgent need for this, because that body generally requires a process, although that can be expedited, but it has to go through them, and then it has to come to Select Water Committee, and then it goes through the process here in the legislature. And so the good question is correct. There's no specific language that says it is a loan of last resort, but it would be expected and understood that anybody who is involved in an irrigation commission and would first be going and looking for other options before they go to that body. And I forgot the second half of that question, but thank you.
Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Thank you. And so I'm trying to like this. And I'm not saying that mean spirited, but how would I know this? If I'm reading the statute, how would I know that an irrigation district is expected to go these other places? It just says right now, yet the board it says they may require, it's not mandatory. So clear that up for me, please.
Okay, Representative Hunt, do you want to take that one right now, or?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Could you repeat the question?
Okay,
I got
Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may repeat the previous speaker's question, he wanted to know, this is not my question, so I hope I can continue after borrowing the other person's question. Page 2, lines 15 and 16 says the board may require them to apply for other things. It doesn't say they shall. So that, I think he wanted that addressed. So my question, I actually have 3, if it's okay. So on line 4, the loan shall be at an interest rate of so this is from the permanent fund, which it says there, and it took me a while to find that, but that's on the top of page 4. The interest rate may be the greater of 1% plus some other, I guess say 1% seems pretty piddly. We're certainly making more than that on our permanent fund. Then I'm kind of following after the chairman of TRW. I have a grammar question. You remember when you were doing math problems in school and it really mattered where you put the parentheses? Because if you put, x plus y in parentheses times 6, that's different from x plus 6y, right? So my question is on lines 4 through 8, it says an interest rate of the greater of 1% plus 0.075 or the current equivalent yield of a treasury security. So I just want to make sure, are we saying that the greater of 1.075 or the treasury, or are we saying 1% plus 0.075 or 1% plus the equivalent yield of a treasury security? Just to be clear. And I'm wondering what the current yield of the, let's just say a 5-year treasury security is. I haven't kept up. I don't suppose it's very big. So I guess I'm a little concerned. You know, we've had a lot of discussion about these things over the last several years at lending out our funds at lower than what we would be getting if we were investing it. This doesn't seem a very good time to be doing that, although I do like water, just like the previous questioner.
Would you like to respond, Representative Hunt?
Mr. Pro Tem, yes, I think I've got a better handle now. So first off, to the good member from the center of the state, the reason that that's in there is that, again, it says that that the board may require that an irrigation district apply for other grants or loan programs. It doesn't say shall, because again, I think that the folks that are involved in these irrigation districts sort of have an understanding that these are the other channels that you go through currently. You go through the water development folks, you go through potentially through private money, wherever you can go. So, I mean, when this bill was put together, it was just sort of understood that requiring that they go shop around elsewhere was not necessarily needed. So that's why it says may. As to the good chairwoman of Labor Health and her concerns concerning the treasury securities and percentages on loans and interest, I'm honestly not terribly familiar with financial law and with standards, but that's just the language that our legislative attorneys put in the bill. And so as I understand it, that's just going off of what is the generally accepted practice when it comes to these kind of loans and such. So, thank you.
Okay, we're on House Bill 188. Is there any further questions? Proposed math problems, further questions? Question being called. All those in favor that when the committee of the whole has reported, do so. The recommendation of House Bill 188 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed? House Bill 188 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 156. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 156, sponsored by Representative Sherwood, 24-hour wine permits. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 156, 24-hour wine permits, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Flitner, Haroldson, Hunt, Jennings, Knapp, Newsom, Sweeney, Winter. Representative Flitner, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Flitner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 156 do pass. And with the description of the bill, I will pass it off to the good representative from House District 45.
Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a oops, we left you out cleanup bill. This bill comes as a request from our Wyoming wineries and has been vetted by the division that regulates and enforces liquor sales and is also supported by the association that represents our Wyoming liquor retailers. This would give Wyoming wineries, those who are manufacturing their own products, the same ability as distilleries and breweries have to host events off-premise for promotions and sales. Simply put, word for word, this is a wine version of House Bill 219, which was alcoholic beverages 24-hour permit, which went into effect July 1st of 2018. That bill allowed distilleries to have these permits, while this bill gives the same ability to our Wyoming wineries. It does not allow private citizens to be wine retailers, which would be a concern for enforcement and retailers alike. It is an allowance for 12 manufacturer off-premise permits annually for promotional events. By supporting this bill, we are giving our Wyoming wineries, 9 in total, a new tool and a equal playing field to market their products and increase their revenues. So I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none and question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Flintner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, to do so with the recommendation that House Bill 156 do pass, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. House Bill 156 has passed committee of the whole. Congratulations, Representative Sherwood. All right, the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 229. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 229, sponsored by Representative Nyman, Livestock Identification Choice Act. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 229, Livestock Identification Choice Act, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Eklund, Fortner, Heiner, Larson Dan, Western, Winter, excused, Representative Wharf. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure, Chairman Eklund?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that House Bill 229 do pass. There is a standing committee amendment. I'll try to explain this a little bit before we vote on it. The House Committee, Ag Committee got a little too efficient. We took two ideas and combined them into one standing committee amendment. So I'd like to divide we had so much fun this morning. With your indulgence, body, I'd like to divide this amendment if I could. And I'll explain that. And I move standing committee amendment number 1.
Okay.
And can I explain the division or what do I do here?
Mr. Chairman, real quick, where would you like to divide on that?
I would like to divide line 1 through 8 or 7, whichever 8, as division 1 and 9 and 10 as division 2.
Okey doke. Yep. Mr. Chairman, that looks divisible, and go ahead. What would you like to start with?
So the first part of the amendment included what amounts to brucellosis identification. And that part fits into this ID bill very well, and I would appreciate an aye vote on that part. I'd answer any questions people might have.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on Division 1? Further discussion? All those in favor of Division 1 to Standing Committee Amendment number 1 on House Bill 229, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Division 1 has been adopted. We are on to Division 2 of Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to 229. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Chairman, so Division 2, we got a call from the state vet, and he explained to us this really shouldn't be in state law. So in sheep, there's a disease called scrapie, and on a federal level, there is a scrapie surveillance and testing program, and that really isn't a requirement we should be putting into state law on animal ID. So I would ask the body to vote no on this half of the amendment. It's Division 2 of Standing Committee 1, House Bill 229. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions on Division number 2? Seeing none, all those in favor of Division number 2 to Standing Committee Amendment number 1 on House Bill 229, please signify by saying aye. Excuse me. Those opposed, no.
No.
Division number 2 to Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has failed. We are back on the bill. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I turn the management of this bill over to its sponsor from the, I guess, the Devil's Tower region.
All righty, Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you House Bill number 229 and ask for your favorable consideration to try to give you some background what the nexus of this is and what the point of this is in 2013, prior to 2013, livestock industries and a governmental agency that works with those folks work together to develop a workable program to increase the ability to conduct essential animal traceability or tracing in the event of any kind of a disease outbreak. Well, that work culminated in 2013 with the USDA, with that group's implementation of a new regulation on traceability for livestock moving interstate. And the regulation requires that adult cattle and bison be officially identified and moved interstate. And in that regulation, this organization recognized that that organization could both improve animal traceability and provide livestock producers with the flexibility of being able to choose among various animal identifications devices when transporting their livestock. Well, this new regulation authorizes livestock producers to choose among the official identification devices, metal ear tags, radio frequency identification, ear tags, brands, tattoos, group lots, back tags, anything that they would so see fit. Well, in 2019, without any of the normal legislative steps necessary to change existing law, this entity issued a mandate to phase out the use of metal ear tags and require these livestock producers to exclusively use RFID in the beginning of January the 1st of 2023. Well, a lawsuit was filed in that particular situation against this entity, and that mandate from the federal government was quickly withdrawn. However, again, in July of 2020, without following any of the normal legislative process, the necessary change to the existing law, this same entity published a simple notice in the Federal Register informing the industry that it still plans to eliminate the use of metal ear tags and then in the effect or any other type of previously identified in the Code of Federal Regulations identification means that are currently implemented. And this was done in 2013 when those were implemented. Well, the effect of this unusual action by this agency was to deprive livestock producers the flexibility to be able to choose from the various official animal identification devices that are already authorized and be under use under federal law. So with that in mind, the purpose of this legislation is to codify into Wyoming law the various animal identification devices that current federal law authorizes Wyoming producers to use and to choose from when they're shipping their livestock interstate. Thus, it also will ensure that Wyoming livestock producers are not deprived their ability to decide which official animal identification device best fits their practices. And then it would allow them, it will protect the Wyoming livestock producers from the type of overreach that this federal government has attempted to try to do by circumventing the normal legislative practice, allowing states to be able to all speak to this issue and to be able to pass it through the legislative process. What we're trying to do is to set in Wyoming law the recognition of CFR 9 CFR Part 86, which identifies these various forms of identification for livestock producers. And what it's asking is that the federal government would respect that law, and that if they're going to change it, don't mandate it, go through the proper channels through legislative process and make the change, and then we'll recognize that. And so with that, give you kind of some background on that. We'll go into the bill. As you go through, you can see under section 1, we are creating 2 new subsections where we are inserting as C and D, and this is Wyoming statute 11-18-117. And as you can also see, we are striking the word national as we do not have a current national program. There is no national program. And so we're striking that language out of there. Until there's a need for a national program, there's no point in having it in our law, in our statutes. If you move on to page 2, lines 1 through 23 is current statute. Also, again, you'll see as we're striking the word national. As you go on to page 3, line 1 through 14 is current state statute with the striking of the word national again as well. Well, beginning on line 15, we insert a new section stating that for the purpose of this section, Wyoming livestock owners may choose to identify animals using any methods set forth in 9 CFR or Code of Federal Regulation, Part 86, as adopted on January the 9th, 2013, as well as any additional methods that are later approved by the federal government as official identification. And to just kind of help understand, nobody in here is wanting to try to limit any types of identification for livestock producers for the state. You can use anything you want. But what we're saying is the identification systems that are currently identified in the federal CFR that was acted on legislatively. And those numerous types of identification are what Wyoming recognizes until it changes. And so what it's allowing for is the livestock producers, their freedom of choice in how those identifications are made on their particular practices. There was some information that was given out that even that mandate, and they said this was a cheap amount, it would cost $1.9 billion for the livestock industry to implement that mandate that was being put on them without legislative move. And so another consideration. So with that, I would stand for any questions you might have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Nyman. Are there any questions? Seeing none and question being heard, all those in favor of Chairman Eckman's motion that when, all those in favor of Chairman Eckman's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 229 do pass, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right,
Aye.
House Bill 229 has passed the committee of the whole. Congratulations, Representative Nyman. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 193. The reading clerk, please read the bill.
House Bill 193, sponsored by Representative Crago. County Attorneys, Representation of Special Districts. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 193, County Attorneys, Representation of Special Districts, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Oakley, Olson, Washit, Zwanitzer. Noes, Larson Dan, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Yin. Representative Olson, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 193 do pass, and I turn over the explanation of the bill to the author, our newest good country lawyer.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you House Bill 193 and ask for your favorable consideration. I was going to start by telling you this is a simple little bill, but realize that's the death knell, so I'm not going to tell you that. Essentially, this bill allows any of our 23 county attorneys to represent any special district located wholly within their county boundaries. I'm bringing this bill to solve a problem in my home county, as well as in a few other counties around the state. For several years, and as long as I've been a deputy county attorney, a lot of the county attorneys, I shouldn't say a lot, several of the county attorneys have represented a few of the special districts located within their counties. For example, I have represented our local weed and pest district and our local solid waste district for quite some time. Other counties around the state have done the same. However, sometime this winter, one of our state's county attorneys requested an opinion from the chief attorney in the state regarding this matter and was instructed by said attorney that there is not statutory authority for the county attorneys to represent any special district within their county. As a result, I brought this bill so that I, along with some of the other county attorneys, may continue to represent some of the special districts in our counties. This bill would allow each county attorney office to continue to do as it deems appropriate. In other words, it would only have to represent who it wants to represent. The language in the statute is permissive. It does not mandate any representation. In small counties like mine, it will mean thousands of taxpayer dollars are saved each year in legal fees. Closing, I would reiterate that the bill does not require any representation, and that's an important fact about the bill. Rather, it just gives those of us who want to keep representing our special district clients at a savings to the taxpayer the ability to do so. I'll walk you through the bill quickly. On page 1, it creates a section, which is in the special district laws, 1612-203. And therein it states that special districts may request legal assistance from the county attorney's office. Now on page 2, the only other provision it creates is a subsection in 18.302, which sets forth all of the other county attorney duties. And it creates subsection D and says that the county attorney may represent a special district wholly located within its county. The effective date of this bill would be July 1, and there is no fiscal impact to the state. Thank you, and I would gladly stand for questions.
Alrighty, are there any questions, committee? Seeing none, and whoa. Representative Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a little bit of concern that I've heard from this really deals with the overall policy and dealing with conflicts that can arise. And in particular, in the smaller counties, when you look at hospital districts and some of the other more complex districts and the work that goes on with it. And so, understanding the purpose behind the bill and that there can be some savings and that some of this work does go on by our county attorneys. I'm thinking, is it appropriate, and I asked this question along with a couple others as we go forward, is that maybe the county commissioner set a policy and establish which districts may or may not be available to use the county attorney's services? Because if we say may, then what we're doing is we're allowing, and this is something is when somebody comes into your office and they start talking to you, they start telling you their problems, and all of a sudden you are conflicted out. So they say it's something with a special district that is actually contrary to the position of the county. And this does happen, is now you're conflicted out as a county attorney from representing the county and that special district. And now we're hiring 2 outside counsel. So I just would like to see that question addressed and if there are any possible solutions for this. Thank you.
Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Representative, Chairman Hunt. I was just going to take a little bit of a stab at that question from my perspective as chairman of the committee and as a lawyer. So the question of conflicts, is obviously not uncommon in our world. We have an entire section of ethics rules that guide our way through that process. And I think the good county attorney can speak to the immense amount of conflicts that arise already within the work that a county attorney's office does, just representing the commission on a daily basis. But the reality is that if an ethics issue arises between the conflict of representing 2 different clients that may have a conflict, there's basically two ways to move forward. Number one, this is if there's not a statutory exception, which I think is where the good chairman of minerals is going, which isn't a bad idea. There's 2 ways to go forward. Number one, both clients sign a waiver, they agree, they recognize that the conflict exists, you put it forward in writing to them, they both submit to it, they say, let's move forward. And what they do in that waiver is they recognize that if the conflict arises where they take completely different positions, that you can no longer represent both of those entities. And so you withdraw from all representation. So obviously that's scenario number one. Scenario number 2 is you don't represent either because the conflict is apparent. And that's, I believe, the analysis the county attorney's office would go through when it was presented with the opportunity to represent a board. It would have to go through that analysis before it entered into representation and determine whether the conflict exists. If it does, whether it's waivable and whether the clients consent to it. So I think that process is, I think it would occur naturally because the attorneys are going to be guided by the rules to do so. But I also don't think that, I think what's proposed, we never discussed, and we had the county commissioners or the association that represents our counties present at the meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't get to discuss that opportunity. I will say that the association testified in favor of this bill. They had no concerns with the bill. They recognized that they navigate with their attorneys through conflicts on a daily basis. But, if that's a second reading amendment that we consider, then I think that would be appropriate for second reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of questions for the new country lawyer. Can a county sue a special district or vice versa? And if so, does this happen at what frequency in Wyoming? Thank you.
Representative Grego, would you like a chance yet? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to respond to these questions in order. In regards to conflicts, which was the question the Speaker Pro Tem brought up, there is always a potential for conflict. But I will tell you in my dealings, and I've been doing this for quite a while, I have more conflicts with my required clients within the county than I do with my special districts and the county. I have to represent, I'm tasked with representing every elected official in my county, and they don't always agree. And so we have ways to deal with those conflicts, and I implement those same methodologies to deal with conflicts if they arise with the special districts, which, to be honest, are few and far between. In regards to the question from the representative from House District 51, yes, they can sue each other. But at that point, as the chairman of Judiciary alluded to earlier, we as lawyers have rules we have to follow, and those rules come into play at that point. Once we've identified a conflict, we have to deal with it according to those rules, which are outside the statutes. Those are based in our ethical rules, and the bar, regulates those rules and tells us what we do or do not have to do. And that's how I deal with it. Follow the rules that a lawyer has to follow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In support of the bill, I think what this really comes down to is local and county control. And I think that's important. We're talking about the county's money and their own budgets. And they should be able to make these decisions. Basically, it's a resource allocation, and I don't think that we should take that away from them. If this is what counties choose to do, to have basically an in-house counsel and a county attorney, and to utilize that. It's been stated several times, if there's conflicts, then those can be dealt with individually, but to address a scenario brought up where if they're both conflicted out, then there would have to be two sets of attorneys. And while that may be true, I think that's less likely and less what we're looking at here than the everyday savings and control that would be had, and the benefit to the counties of allowing this. And I guess I'd also just like to point out, the reality is this was kind of a fix for a lot of places. This is basically status quo. If they've chosen this, if counties have chosen this and have been representing districts, they've already been doing that. So this is allowing them to continue what they've been doing, because this opinion came out, and basically it was kind of one of those that when we get, the Attorney General saying it wasn't, it was just like a recommendation, probably, if you will, could be taken as such, like you need to get statutory authority for it. So we're asking for that statutory authority so counties can continue to do the work that they've been doing in some places for the good of their communities.
All right, thank you. Representative Larson Dan, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was against this in committee, and I'm not a lawyer, but I had questions, obviously. I contacted my sheriff, and he said the biggest issue was probably just the conflict of interest that may come about. And his other point was that you already have way too much to do. Oh, county attorney, I'm sorry. Whoops. The county attorney who I talked to. The other question I have is, does this put the county attorney in kind of a predicament when he runs for reelection? He may have helped somebody that they thought they shouldn't have, a district, or he may have not have helped somebody. I just don't know if that's a good place to put him in. The other question I had during the committee was, can the county attorney or the deputy county attorney already do this on their own time? And I think the answer I got from them was yes, we could do it on weekends or in after hours or such, and not bring it inside the county attorney's office. So I would say vote no.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has to do with not just the conflict of interest. I mean, I think that will sort out in the next reading, but how's this going to be paid for? And I mean, there's only like 24 hours in a day, 5 days in a week or 7 if you work the weekend. And I mean, you can't be in 2 places at once. And what do you do? Just, I realize it's permissive, but do you just sort of put everything in the county on hold while you address the issue that you're taking care of with the special district? Those 2 questions. Thank you.
Yep, with Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So good discussion. Understand the issue, but I still didn't quite get the question answered that I had asked, probably because I asked 7 questions. So that's my own fault. The one I'm really looking at though is the county attorney and how it's funded is all an interesting, how all that works with the state funding, but the control of the commissioners. And so my question was, is this bill better if we say with the permission of the county attorney or with the county commissioners? With their consent. And I just throw that out for consideration. If that would help make that bill a little bit better, because you can, in small counties, you can see the problems coming a mile away. So that's what I'm saying is maybe let's look at how we let those county commissioners have that say or that control over that to make sure they don't get conflicted out on purpose, or so games aren't played. So there are clear boundaries or guidelines for the county attorneys to do that. And the question was raised, and it's a very good one. And it's the amount of time, and the amount of time that they have. And this was one issue raised to me by a county attorney in my district, was, hey, I'm limited on time the way it is. And even if someone comes in and I have to tell them no, it still takes an hour to hear their story and an hour to say no. So that's, again, I'm just looking for a solution of where maybe the commissioners set a policy or permission, just something along those lines. And I'd just like to hear a little bit more as we work this out.
Representative Grego, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this time I'll work in reverse order and try to answer the Speaker Pro Tem's question regarding permission by the commissioners. I have no opposition to an amendment that would put that into the bill. In practice, that's how it worked for me anyways. I talked both to the county attorney, the elected county attorney in our office, as well as the commissioners, and essentially asked for their permission to do that. And so that I have no problem if we can craft an amendment that adequately addresses that problem. That's fine with me. I think we'll have to be careful when we get into the statute regarding the language that's already in statutes regarding how the county commissioners can and cannot hire outside counsel. And so we'll have to work around that. Going back to the questions from the representative from District 41 regarding the pay for this and the time allocation, there will be no additional pay. Most of our county attorneys around the state are on salary. So if they decide to do this, then it does not increase pay, it does not decrease pay. It won't change anything as far as their pay, time allocation. That's why I put the language in regarding May. Each office would get to decide whether they want to do this or not. And they decide that at the local level, not here in the Capitol. And in regards to the questions from the representative, sorry, I'm looking up his number, from District 2025. Yes, I agree. Most of our county attorneys do have a lot to do, probably more than they can handle. But there's a few of us that do have the time to go do what I do. I've been doing it for many, many years now, and all I'm asking is that we have a bill so I can continue to keep doing that. And those other county attorneys that want to do the same thing can. If they have the time, let them. I'm not asking that we require anybody to do anything they don't have time to do. Whether we can do it on our own time, to be honest with you, that's probably what will happen in my circumstance if I don't pass the bill. Because I feel like these special districts need representation, and they can't afford, they don't have the funds to go hire counsel outside. The problem with that is we take that county attorney, the deputy county attorney, outside the protections that he receives as being a deputy county attorney. If they start doing work on their own time, they'll have they'll have to worry about insurance. They're going to have to worry about a lot of office space, a lot of the other things that go along with being a private counsel. Whereas if they're doing it as a deputy county attorney, they have all those other things built in and they don't have to worry about that. Last question that was brought up was, are we going to put our county attorneys under pressure at elections? Well, we're all under pressure at elections, right? We all have to make hard decisions. And I guess that's up to each officer to make that decision on their own. And they can decide that at their own county level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Seeing none and question being called, all those in favor of Chairman Olson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report to do so with the recommendation that House Bill 193 do pass, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Committee, House Bill 193 has passed committee of the whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee of the whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 115 do pass. House Bill 120 do pass. House Bill 188 do pass amended. House Bill 156 do pass. House Bill 229 do pass amended. House Bill 193 do pass. Representative Hunt, Chairman.
Chairman Hunt.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
Members, you've heard the motion from the chairman. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Congratulations, Chairman Hunt. Messages from the Senate.
Message 230. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 38, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. Ayes 28, noes 2. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message number 231. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 39, Digital Identity. Ayes 28, noes 2. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 232. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 75, Protective Orders Amendments. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 233. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 107, Transportation Statutory Amendments 2. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 234. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 116, Wyoming Business Council Directors Reduction. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 235. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate Joint Resolution 3, Federal Suspension and Orders on Oil and Gas Production. Ayes 28, noes 2. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 236. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 58, Wyoming Investment in Nursing Funding. Ayes 28, noes 1, excused 1. Message 237. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 100, Internet Freedom Prohibiting Discrimination. Ayes 24, noes 5, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 238. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 114, State Land Leases. Ayes 26, noes 1, conflict 3. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Thank you. Standing committee reports.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1 Judiciary, to whom was referred House Bill 247, Law Enforcement Hiring Practices, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Washit, Yin. Noes, Representatives Larson Dan, Zwanitzer. Representative Rodriguez Williams, excused. Representative Olson, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 23, Public Meetings Executive Session for Security Plans. Respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Washit, Yin, Zwanitzer. Excused, Representative Rodriguez Williams. Representative Olson, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 110 engrossed, Small Claims Procedures, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Washit, Yin, Zwanitzer. Excused, Representative Rodriguez Williams. Representative Olson, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 205, Select Committee on Extractive Industry Transitions. Respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 207, Coal-Fired Generation Facility Closures, Litigation Funding. Respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Noes, Representative Schwartz. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 219, Investment Funds Committee Membership. Respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 241, Fees for Oversized and Overweight Loads on Highways. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 159, Liquor Manufacturer Regulations. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Air, Hunt. Representative Air, Vice Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 187, Elected Official Residency Requirement. Respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Hunt, Roscoe. Noes, Representatives Air, McGuire, Zwanitzer. Representative Air, Vice Chairman.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader,
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the 18th day of March, 2021.
committee announcements. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, Military Affairs will meet tomorrow upon noon recess to consider Senate File 3, Senate File 13, and Senate File 106.
Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health and Social Services, will meet 15 minutes after adjournment this afternoon to consider 4 bills: House Bill 253, House Bill 161, House Bill 70, and House Bill 134. No public testimony will be taken. We will just be working the bills. We'll be in our usual connector room 3.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 3 will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in conference room 3. Continuation of House Bill 189, mine product taxes for natural gas consumed on site. House Bill 146, personal property depreciation. House Bill 226, permanent mineral trust fund investment in specie. House Bill 138, tax on unearned income. House Bill 182, personal income tax. House Bill 211, property taxes. And House Bill 162, Medical Treatment Opportunity Act. And Mr. Speaker, we're having a little bit of difficulty getting those posted, giving each other a little grace because our normal staff has not been able to get through the snow yet. So that will be on the website soon. And it will also include the provision that any bills that don't get heard in the morning, we will continue the meeting on adjourn tomorrow evening. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, will meet at 8 o'clock in the morning to continue our working of Senate File 25.
Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess in E001 and online to continue consideration of House Bill 82, implementation requirements for medical marijuana, Senate File 87, voyeurism amendments, and Senate File 96, homicide amendments.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations will meet on adjournment to hear the Senate File 1, the explanation of the Senate budget amendments. On adjournment tomorrow, we will hear Senate File 9, Senate File 93, Senate File 120, and any re-referrals. And there is also probably a continuation tonight or on that same of House Bill 244.
Chairman Flitner, thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd like to give my committee announcement and then a privilege, if I may, when I'm done. Tomorrow, your committee number 6 will meet at noon, and we will go over Senate File 88 and House Bill 220. That's tomorrow at noon. Recess.
Please proceed with your privilege if you'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as you all know, today is St. Patrick's Day. And it is also the birthday of the tallest leprechaun in the House. So if you all would join with me in singing happy birthday to Representative Hunt. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to all the leprechauns.
Mr.
And Representative Hunt as
Mr.
well.
Speaker,
Yes, Representative Chairman Olson.
just because we did such a good job at that, we would not want to miss Representative Yin's birthday, which was yesterday. Sunday. It was Sunday. So while we were all in our homes tucked in from the snow, we missed that birthday. So maybe we can do that one more time.
and anyone else who had a March birthday. Any other privileges of the floor? I see
Yes.
Representative McGuire on this side, and then I see Representative Sweeney. Representative McGuire, please
Thank you,
proceed.
Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor. I'd like to announce.
Please
that the-
proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House Republican Caucus has been postponed until tomorrow night, Thursday, March 18th, 15 minutes after adjournment. So that's tomorrow, Thursday. Thank you.
Representative Sweeney,
Privilege of the floor, Mr.
please
Speaker.
proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this is a very special day for me because it's named after me, St. Patrick's Day. So I wish you a very, very happy St. Patrick's Day. Don't drink too much green beer. But I don't know how many of you received a letter from the President of the Senate from Ireland. I'm assuming if you have a good Irish last name, you probably were included, but I'll just, it was great interest. On St. Patrick's Day, our national holiday, we also celebrate the long and enduring relationship between our two republics. For decades, people have left our shores to make a valuable contribution to life in America, many of whom have, like yourself, gone into public service. We are proud to have at least 22 American presidents who can trace their ancestry back to our island. And that's signed by, I'm sure I'm gonna butcher the name, but Mark Dolly. And I found it really interesting that Wyoming, along with Montana, Colorado, and some neighboring states have between 11 to 15% Irish descent. And my home state of Pennsylvania is just over 15%. So with that, happy St. Pat's Day, and I'm truly glad that you're here to honor me. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any other privileges of the floor? So I have just a couple of announcements. First of all, I know we're behind in our schedule. We've lost a couple of days due to the storm. That does not change where we are in our legislative calendar. Today is still the end of our 20th day. So for those of you that keep track, you have 60 constitutional days as the 66th Wyoming legislature to convene outside of special session. So your duty, your tenure as a legislator in the 66 will be 1/3 over when we sound the gavel today, minus special session. 1/3 of your tenure in this chamber doing the work of the people has completed. So I think that's a milestone. I don't know that it's a milestone we should be celebrating on St. Patrick's Day, but it is a milestone. So, but just keep that in mind as we continue to work and continue to do good things on behalf of the state of Wyoming. We are making progress, but our time is limited. Our time is limited, and soon pictures on the wall of the 66. Just on the lost days, my good colleague at the other end, the president and I, we're going to be summoning or visiting with all of you to see if we want to make up on a Saturday, one of those days, or 2 of those days, or if we want to consider extending on the end or one of each, so that we get our full days as the 66th Wyoming legislature in this general session. So, but I think the decision has already been, it will not be this Saturday. This Saturday will not be one of those added days. It will be a following Saturday, and we'll certainly have that discussion maybe within caucuses or in a house, all house caucus, so we can coordinate with our Senate colleagues. So with that, I think further announcements. I think the majority floor leader has an announcement.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So tomorrow's committee of the whole list will be the following: House Bill 236, House Bill 165, House Bill 164, House Bill 166. House Bill 228. House Bill 171. House Bill 198. House Bill 217. House Bill 190. House Bill 125. House Bill 132. House Bill 207. House Bill 205, and House Bill 154. And Mr. Speaker,
Please.
did you go over like a last, or maybe you did that this morning, that our last day in committee is Friday, right?
Go ahead.
Last day in committee will be Friday, and our last day of committee of the whole will be Monday.
All right. Any further announcements? Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Further announcements. You've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion that the House of Representatives 66 adjourned their 20th day of session until 10 a.m. Thursday, March 18th for the 21st day of the 66th Wyoming Legislature. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Congratulations. We are adjourned.